I'm Anna Görner, Managing Director of CIPSEM, and will be the moderator of this session. Yeah, it's all about exploring the debt for climate swaps and how they can serve as an innovative and mutually beneficial tool for sustainable finance, and especially for countries in the global south facing climate risks and debt burden. And together with our distinguished speaker, Erik Grigoryan, and panelist Dr. Matthias Walz, we will look at the core concept, also some real-world case studies, and the roles that various actors can play in bringing these swaps from ideas to reality, to implementation. So whether you're a policymaker or a student or a researcher, this is a very good chance to engage with a topic that sits right at the interaction between finance, justice also, and climate action. And before we dive into today's topic, just take a brief moment to introduce CIPSEM. Many of you know it quite intimately. We're very happy to have a number of our current course participants and also alumni here today. So this event is being hosted by CIPSEM, the Center for International Postgraduate Studies of Environmental Management, based at TUD, Dresden University of Technology. And for almost 50 years, CIPSEM has been running advanced training programs in environmental management, supported by the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNESCO, and the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, now abbreviated as BMUKN. And each year we can bring together environmental professionals from around the world to learn, to share, and to collaborate across different sectors and disciplines on pressing sustainability challenges. And many of our alumni go on into leadership roles in government, NGOs, academia, and international organizations. And I'm very thrilled that you are here. And this event also reflects the spirit of CIPSEM to learn from each other across borders and boundaries of disciplines and to tackle complex issues like climate finance and environmental justice also. So let me walk you through what we have planned for today, for the next couple of hours, just to give you an idea of the flow. So we will begin with a keynote by Erik Grigoryan, who will unpack the concept of debt for climate swaps, explaining how they work and what challenges there are and what can make them successful. And after Erik's talk, we will open the floor for discussions, both from you here in the room and also from the online audience. And then we'll take a short networking break and then come back for a panel discussion, including, and we add more perspectives, including that of Dr. Matthias Walz from UNU-FLORES, before then wrapping up around 5:15. So it's a compact but rich agenda, and I'm very excited that you're all here with us. And for those of you online, we are very much looking forward also to hearing your thoughts and questions throughout the session, and you can share them in the chat. And if somebody posts a question you like, you can also give it a thumbs up. So this helps us to prioritize questions also for the discussion round. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Erik Grigoryan. Erik is the founder and CEO of the Environment Group. It's a consultancy dedicated to advancing sustainable environmental policies and practices. And he also serves as the special envoy of Armenia on debt for climate swap initiatives. And with over 20 years of experience in the public sector and working with international organizations, Erik has had several prominent positions. From 2018 to 2020, he served as Armenia's Minister of Environment. And in this role, he was also the chair of the Interstate Ecological Council of the Commonwealth of Independent States and Armenia's National Designated Authority for the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund. And additionally, he also acted as a political and operational focal point for the Global Environment Facility and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in Armenia. And Erik is also an esteemed alumnus of the 30th UNESCO BMU Environmental Management course, the EM30. So that was in 2007. That was also organized by CIPSEM here at TUD. And his commitment also to the CIPSEM community is noteworthy. Erik was, for example, the person who initiated the LinkedIn alumni group, and also recently he participated in a community of practice that developed a dialogue model for peer consultation, which was then also introduced at the Hamburg Sustainability Conference in 2024. And just this morning, Erik returned from the Hamburg Sustainability Conference 2020, where he also engaged with global leaders on climate finance and debt for climate swap mechanisms. And today, Erik will share insights on how debt for climate swaps can serve as innovative solutions to alleviate financial burdens for developing nations while promoting investments in climate resilience and sustainable development. So please join me in welcoming Erik. Now it should be working.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna, and thank you for inviting me. Actually, it's quite exciting to return to Dresden after 18 years. So it was 2007 when we graduated from here. And after my graduation, actually, I tried every time that I can contribute somehow to contribute for CIPSEM and for university. I became an ambassador of Technical University of Dresden for many years and tried to distribute as much as possible information through citizens of my country. Although I was the first student from Armenia who participated in the environment management course, but after that, a lot of participants from Armenia also participated, and some of them now are working in the environment sector very successfully. So I would like, just from my experience, to say you that you are in a fantastic place. You are getting fantastic knowledge here, hopefully, and coming mainly from developing countries. Actually, you have much more opportunities to change something in your countries because of lower capacity available in developing countries, including my country. So your knowledge and experience will be much more important in your country. So today I will try to talk about that for climate swap. It's innovative climate mechanism that I'm working quite long already. And maybe some of you hear about that for nature or any kind of swap mechanism, but I will give some primary information because starting from 80s, some kind of tools called debt for nature swap, and it was one of topic of my final paper also here, debt for nature swap. It was mechanisms that were designed to help developing countries to restructure their debt when they are under kind of problem with serving of their debt. But most of these mechanisms were a result of debt problem. So philosophy behind of this tool was debt restructuring, and it was a time that there was a worsening of environment situation in developing countries, mainly in South America, and it was kind of mechanism helping developing countries to restructure their debt. But different between debt for nature swap and debt for climate swap that I'm trying to explain today is quite significant. Although the name looks similar, and every time that we are talking about debt for climate, we hear that we know about this. It's coming from 80s. It's quite common. It wasn't used not only in South America, but also in East European countries, in some other places. But idea and philosophy behind that for climate swap is a little bit different. So we try to combine that for nature swap that is coming from 80s with the Paris Agreement under Climate Convention and obligation of creditor countries. I don't know how familiar you with the global climate agreements or obligations taken by developed countries, but according to regulations, it was proposed that developed countries will support developing countries with implementation of their NDCs. NDCs are kind of documents that's prepared by every country for a 5-year period called National Determined Contribution. So each country is coming with their own ambitions, what they are going to do for climate activities, for adaptation and mitigations, and divided to 2 parts is conditional and non-conditional. Unconditional part that countries are pledging to do by themselves, and conditional that they are expecting some financial support coming from developed countries. So this sums is here. It was 100 billion annually that was expected that developed countries will contribute to support developing countries. And during the last COP, this figure was changed. Now it's initially about $300 billion annually. And having these figures still, it's a big issue for many developing countries to find financial resources for climate adaptation, specifically for the countries which are facing a problem with small island development countries or climate vulnerable countries because they need financial resources for adaptation. Although there are some funds available for climate mitigation because there are some bankable projects, but for adaptation, this part is still lacking, and many developing countries are looking to find financial resources to support their climate adaptation goals. And the idea actually to concentrate on bilateral public debt. So this part is explanation of tool, how it will work. So idea is that if 2 countries, debitor and creditor, any debitor and creditor, let's take developing or developed countries, will decide bilaterally that some part of foreign debt that debtor country should pay to creditor may be spent internally on climate projects. So developed countries will reduce their obligation under Paris Agreement or different climate processes or pledges, and developing countries will report that this finance was provided by developed countries. So it will give a very unique chance to try to find financial resources immediately for climate adaptation activities. Because although there are the sums that I show you, it seems that they are huge financial resources. But once developing countries are looking for climate finance resources from donors, UN institutions, climate funds, usually it's not enough. The process is too complicated, the requirements are too complicated, and they are facing a problem to access to these financial resources. It's important that once this swap negotiated between debitor and creditor countries, this money will be spent internally in a country, also making socioeconomic positive impact with the new jobs, infrastructure, and different other activities that will be there. To explain it in details, instead of paying part of the debt to the foreign country's treasury as a foreign debt, this money will be spent internally on local currency to do climate projects. it's not debt forgiveness, relief. It's not any kind of other mechanism that you can hear. It's some kind of innovative climate finance mechanism without complicating the process, without going to Paris Club, without going to different any processes. Because just to explain you how any kind of debt forgiveness is working or relief, if any creditor country will decide to do some debt forgiveness for debitor, then debitor country should go and negotiate with each other debitor country that they will agree that this debt forgiveness will happen. And it may take years, 5 years, 10 years. It's quite a complicated process. So the idea that here is that to try to do this process as simple as possible, and to be able to spend money immediately, because each dollar spent on adaptation today is much more valuable than if you are spending it after 5 or 10 years. Essentially, this instrument is, again, it's the main, I will say, the message. It's not debt forgiveness tool. It's an alternative platform for implementation of NDCs. It allows creditor countries to fulfill their commitments under Paris Agreement. So it's not something that you are, as a debitor or developing countries, going to ask to not pay your duties, but offering alternative deal that creditor also will be able to fulfill their obligations. This will help to implement NDCs, and of course it will give an opportunity to reduce that burden of debitor countries, also opening some space for additional financial resources. It may be some mix, of course. For example, you may decide to negotiate with one of your countries on such kind of deal, but to combine it with some mixed finance coming from MDBs, from EBRD or EIB if it's your country, and to make your project much bigger and much comprehensive. So we call it win-win because seems that creditor countries may not be interested because they will not receive directly their financial resources that they provided as a debt, but there's a list of activities that will help debitor and creditor countries actually to feel that they are winning from this deal. Of course, it's a debt relief and it will give a positive impact on country's economy. If you are doing a water infrastructure project, you are buying some pipes, you are doing an investment, you are buying materials, you are investing in products, you are paying taxes, you are paying for work. Those are all multiplicative effects that you will have socio-economic effect in your country. It's strengthening economic stability. It's one topic that I want to mention here is about the credit rating, because any negotiation that related to debt is sensitive. So anytime that debitor countries are talking about any activity related to debt, then it may negatively harm, for example, the rating of the country, because some signals saying that maybe countries are facing problems with the debt sustainability, and then the private debt interest rate may jump, so it will be very costly for debitor countries. But during our work, actually, we had the chance to talk with rating agencies and explain that it's a bilateral negotiation, not connected with debt forgiveness, Paris Club. And in the end, what was a response from crediting agencies, if any debtor country may negotiate with creditor country and reduce that burden, they are happy. Because in the end, your debt will be less than was before that. So this rating issue, every time if you will go tomorrow to your government, your Ministry of Finance, and inform them about this tool and say that there is an option that we can negotiate with our bilateral creditors to do some kind of swap and climate projects, they will say about the ratings and other kind of private debts that will be harmed. So this is very important point to mention that from the rating perspective is positive and not negative one. And as I mentioned during by the last slides, the macroeconomic situation of country is also very important, because being an environmental economist by my background, I will say that during my career, every argument that I had as an environmentalist saying that we need to do this or this activities is important, without combining with socioeconomic impact, was not successful. So although your environmental arguments may be good, but from the moral point or ethic point or third, if they are not combined with socioeconomic figures, it's weaker, specifically in developing countries, because every time that you are going with any activities for environment, you will hear that we are not rich enough to do in environmental activities. Let's firstly think about unemployment, socioeconomic, food, and other. So it should be combined with socioeconomic impact, and actually this mechanism is giving chance not only to combine, but also increase actually the role of environmental activities, because by using this mechanism, you are giving a chance your environmental activities to generate more financial resources to be spent in a country. For example, if you are talking about reforestation activities or afforestation, that needs a huge workforce. If you will be able to do a swap in any small developing countries for several thousand hectares of forest, it means that hundreds or thousands of workplaces that will definitely increase not only the value of this project, but also environmental activities as it is. And this part is very important. Again, usually when you are not considering environmental factors, only looking for economic activities in a mid-term or long-term perspectives, you will fail. There is no any economic activities without proper environment harmonization that were successful in a long term, but the same also for environment. If you are only looking for environment without considering socioeconomic impact, the same. You will fail. And just coming also from developing countries, I will say that poverty is the main environmental problem in many of the countries, because you may have fantastic biodiversity hotspot. You will try to protect it. You may have walls 2-3 meters to prevent any kind of usage from local population, but they will just burn this area every 2-3 days, and it's impossible. You need to find this harmonization between socioeconomic components and environment components. So for debitor country, as I said, it's very clear. The money that will be spent initially for serving of debt in hard currency, this is also very important, by dollar or euro or whatever to be paid to their treasuries. It will be spent by local currency in a country. It's very clear. And this climate adaptation money that is necessary now actually is there. I mean, it's in your budget. It's allocated to be paid as a debt. Alternatively, you will spend for the concrete projects in your country. But also it's benefits for creditor countries, because it means that they may mobilize a lower amount of their obligations. For example, Germany pledged to spend more than $6 billion to support the implementation of NDCs of developing countries, or $1.7 billion only for afforestation activities, again in developing countries. If you are working with these countries and you will somehow agree any portion of swap, then creditor countries can reduce their overall support, and also it can be registered as a ODA, Official Development Assistance, that is also very important for developed countries. It will help to reach goals because participating in many big events on a climate COPs or whatever, you will see that it's very common talks. Developed countries are arguing that it's not enough qualified projects coming from developing countries. Developing countries are arguing that there is not enough money. And even if there are some money, the procedures and guidelines and everything is so complicated that it's impossible to apply with real projects that is necessary for country. In this case, actually, you are facing a situation that most of the supporting financial resources developed by UN institutions or other institutions that's coming from the priorities that is not very well realized by countries. So the ownership level is also going down if you don't have enough capacity here. And as I say, there are some funds like Green Climate Fund or Global Ecological Facility, but the processes are quite complicated. Project preparation phase for GCF is minimum 36 months. You need additional resources to develop these documents. Each document needs a lot of financial resources that it's not available in developing countries. We are concentrating on bilateral public debt because trying to bring interest from creditor countries. Of course, you may approach any private creditor, but they don't have this obligation to do anything for you. But annexed to countries of climate convention, they have obligation to support. This is their obligation, and obligation to support implementation of NDCs. So it's important that whatever you are going to present to your partners, potential partners, it should be somehow presented in your NDC. So you can't just take your infrastructure project, water infrastructure, or road infrastructure project, go to France and say, I will not pay the money, and then we'll report you in a CCC that this was spent on a climate. So from this perspective, it's important. We will actually suggest to concentrate on annexed to countries. Do not spend efforts on the countries that don't have enough incentives to do this. But for example, we approached Japan to work with them because it was a quite big portion of debt that my country, owned to Japan. But then we realized that by their constitution, they have some limitations, so their government can't do any kind of swap because it's not recognized as their own money. So it's a citizen's money, and the government of Japan can't do any swap. So those are the specifications that you need to consider when you are starting negotiation. This process is, I'm trying to be in a surface level as much as possible, but it's so many variations and the processes that should be considered here. But to concentrate on annexed to countries, to concentrate on EU countries, this is a good first choice to consider for your countries if they will be interested on this. So there are key stakeholders when, by the way, you decided to do this, that for climate swap. any country, Pacific Seat, Sri Lanka, Caribbean Seat, Asian countries, Arabic countries, you will decide what will be the activities in the end, how to start the process. So there are some stakeholders like government officials, ministries, creditor countries, and development partners. And there are some steps actually that without fulfilling this step, actually, you can start that process. First, of course, is NDC implementation financial plans. If you don't have your NDCs, you don't have a concrete projects there, if you don't have clear vision what you want to do, then you can't approach creditor countries because you are going to talk with them and to say, let's do project that will support my NDC because this is your obligation. Otherwise, it will not work from the first stage, actually. It's important to coordinate the effort with respective ministries, creditor countries, donor institutions, UN agencies. So every institution has a role here, actually. Important to review priorities of creditor countries. So if you are approaching to France, you know that the country is very much involved in water-related activities, and you may go with the potential water project that they will be interested. If you are looking for the project with Germany, you know the country is very much involved in biodiversity and reforestation activities, and you may go with this proposal to these countries. It's also important to understand their obligations taken by these countries because sometimes you can hear some pledges during the COPs, how much the countries pledge to do, but it's not bold obligations. Bold obligations in their government respective documents. So you are opening and see that this government decided to spend $6 billion during these years. It's a government institutional document, and this is your actually target to try to work for this. It's important to provide full analysis of that sustainability statistics. So everything should be as transparent and as understandable as possible. Otherwise, it will not work. So no one will work if you don't have a statistic, you don't have enough information, because if potential creditor countries will be interested to work with you, then they will need the reporting, they will need the transparency, they will need a clear decision-making process that is very important. So point that says that coordinate debt serving with proposed adaptation and mitigation projects, also a very important point. The idea that if you are serving your debt, again, let's take Germany, you are paying 10 million or 20 million euros per year to serve your debt to Germany. But then you're developing the project that will need 50 million per year. Then you have a problem internally with your budgetary system because this money is not there. Again, to be clear, I will maybe repeat it several times, that is not debt forgiveness. This money will be paid by debitor country, but instead of paying us a debt, will be paid for internal project in a country. So if you have in your budget allocated $20 million that you are going to pay as a foreign debt to Germany, and then you are developing a project proposal that says that $60 million will be spent for this reforestation or water or third project, then you will have a problem with your Ministry of Finance because they don't have this money there. And this is important that the time frame of the potential project and time frame of a climate adaptation and mitigation project will go in line. The same we had with our Ministry of Finance. So what they told us, they said, if we need to pay $10 million, if you are asking $10 million or $9,999,000, we are happy. But if you are asking $1 more, we have a big problem because the whole governmental procedures of the budget allocation, midterm costing, so it's the budgetary process that is very, very problematic. So this point is also very important, actually. Next point. Involvement of corporate institutions of creditor countries and presenting corporate interest with the implementation of debt for climate. Generally, the idea that you are going with a proposal to creditor country and arguing why you are not going to spend the money for that, but spend in your country. If you will add here also corporate interest, then your proposal will be much stronger. For example, in my country, when we decided to talk with France and Armenia is not small island development country, but also quite climate vulnerable. It's already facing 1.5 degree increase of temperature, 9% decrease of precipitation. So we're already facing a problem there, and the problem with water. This system is very inefficient. We still have 70% water losses in drinking water system. 70, not 17. And I remember when I was studying here 20 years ago, I asked my professor of water resources, is there any limitation if loss is more than 40% or 50%, it can't be included in tariff. So it will be operator's cost. And he asked me, how much is your losses? I said 70. He said, you just need to sue them. You can't have a 70% losses, actually. But still, after 20 years, we have 70% losses. Although it was enough water, and even with 70% losses, it was enough, actually, to supply people. Now, because of this climate impact and the decrease of precipitation and water availability, we need to invest. So it's in our NDC that the water is a sector that needs a huge adaptation investment. And we proposed France actually to do a drinking water system investment because Veolia is a company that operating our drinking water system. In the end, technically how it will work, again, without spending this money for serving of debt, we will just give money to Veolia to do this investment. All systems and utilities that is renovated and installed again, it's a public. So it's investment to the country plus all the socioeconomic positive impacts that I already mentioned. Next point, involvement of the political, scientific, and other resources to promote that for climate swap among decision-making persons of creditor countries. So we are trying to use every possible option to promote. For example, again, returning to our case, with France, we have a big diaspora in France, a big diaspora that is voting. It's important for decision makers. So trying to work with them to argue additionally that this deal is very important for us. And if it will happen, of course, the Armenians who are living in France will be much more happy to support the people who will take decision. And many developing countries have a big diasporas in decision-making. The creditor countries, it may work. It may be political, it may be big events, it may be scientific activities. So whatever you can use in the end that will positively impact your negotiation process, you need to use it. Last point is review and analysis of the political and reputation benefits of creditor countries. This is also something that we try to use. Of course, you see it's a big geopolitical processes ongoing. I don't want to go to details, but if there are two creditors that you have from the opposite sides, then you're approaching them saying that you can do the project, you can be the first that you will sign and come to COP and announce that everyone is asking for your debt, but we did this project to help your country. So whatever is possible, try to use for implementation of the project. In the beginning, I talked about the stakeholders. Those are the main institutions that involved in the process. Of course, it's Ministry of Finance that is responsible for mainly coordinating. It may be Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Economy. It may be joint. It's different countries. It's a different structure, but responsible for swap, working with IFIs agencies, providing analysis of debt sustainability. So whatever is related with money and finance, it's under Ministry of Finance, of course. Also considering what kind of policies, strategic documents are available in creditor countries to work on this document. It's Ministry of Environment that is responsible for preparation of NDC implementation plan, whatever is related to climate and the environment, and working with respective ministries and creditor institutions and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, using diplomatic missions, because technically how we'll start, if your country will decide to do that for climate, they will look what kind of creditors you will have. They will look for the portion of that, because if it's 3 million or 5 million or 2 million, the effort and time and whatever is not worth to do it. But if it's 100 million, 200 million, I was working with Sri Lankan government recently. UN asked me to help them, and we developed a very workable swap for $300 million to be supported for hydropower plant. And the idea was that in the end, this hydropower turbines actually may be supplied by French companies also. So this is very important, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because once you decide that, yes, let's do it, then your diplomatic missions will start to work, to ask that this is in our interest, how we will work, and then all next steps will come. So those are the main agencies, but country by country it may change. But usually those Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs are there. The role of IFIs, donor institutions, also very important, because unfortunately, there is not enough capacity in developing countries for debt-related activities, for analysis, for the projects, and you will need some extra support with the studies, with the specialists, with communication strategy, technical expertise. I told about the Sri Lanka when we started to talk about the debt for climate swap there. It was a very negative response coming from local communities. I didn't know why. Then we realized that people think that if debt for whatever is related with nature is happening, then creditor countries will come and take all these resources. They will take their forests, their ocean. So communication strategy is very important to understand how you work, how you explain. This is one of the key documents that is necessary. And it's not only with the local community, but also with other institutions. We had the problem actually in my government when some officials started to use the wording that that stopped the process actually for quite a long time, because when they met one of the creditor countries, they just said, when you are going to forgive our $100 million. Very direct. And it was a country that it was France with the Francophone country, much, the less the GDP per capita, so they just stopped the process, and it took months actually to come back and to try to continue again. So then, we'd ask the Prime Minister office to manage who will talk, how it will work, or any kind of negotiation should be harmonized with the Ministry of Finance, because this all matters. So this communication strategy is very important, and technical expertise. By the way, you will do a proposal. You will say, we are interested on that for climate swap. I just came from Hamburg. It's an initiative coordinated by Germany, France, Colombia, and Kenya. It's debt, nature, and climate. So there are different processes are going now. And it's important when you are talking with creditors and proposing project, you should come with the qualified proposal, it may be 10 pages, but it should clearly mention what you are going to do, how you are going to do the monitoring, how will be the transparency, whatever. So for this, I mean, when we are talking about the bigger developing countries, it's more or less there are some capacities. Imagine when we are talking about seats, it's a population of 50,000 people. They have one or two finance specialists in Ministry of Finance and completely not involved in any kind of these talks. So it's important that this technical expertise, and actually these institutions are very much interested to be involved in this process. Years ago, when we just started this talk about that for climate swap, it was very, very negatively responded by IFIs. So the World Bank and others, they just said, do not use word debt, no debt, don't touch that. It's okay. I mean, don't touch them. In the time, actually, because we presented this mechanism in a General Assembly, but the wording was different. It was called Innovative Climate Finance Mechanism without using that. But during this time, actually, when this changed after COVID, it's not about one or two countries. Now 60 countries are facing some problem, and it's not lower economies, it's middle level countries. Most of them are climate vulnerable, and this is something that actually needs for creditors also. Because if it's need only developing countries, it's difficult to promote. Every time there are so many justifications why it's not possible to do. But if it's a solution for creditor countries, for example, let's take a Ukraine, so they can't pay their debt. It's a lot of problem there. And if somehow this mechanism may help to invest some money for renewable, for example, the creditors will be much more interested on this activity. So now is what I'm trying to say, that now actually interest is coming from both sides. If you have a qualified proposal, you can clearly argue and present their benefits, corporate benefit, reputational benefit, financial benefit, whatever, then you have a chance to do this deal, especially if your country is climate vulnerable, and especially if your NDC and this implementation plan and this financial plan is there. Because, for example, in my country, we included that for climate swap in NDC financial plan, saying that we are looking for conditional activities to get money from climate funds, to get money under Article 6 with the carbon trade, but also to get money by that for climate swap. And just to say that we announced that we are going to do a lot of reforestation. We joined the Bond Challenge with the 50,000 hectare of reforestation, and then some other governmental decree. And now a lot of different initiatives are going in my country from the donor perspective, and a lot of reforestation is done there, because basement was already there. And the big project that we are expecting from Germany, it's unfortunately, I already told Anna we were expecting to have it in November, but the day that I was in Frankfurt negotiating with KfW, with the BMZ, was very happy that finally we are going to sign it, but then Minister of Finance resigned and government resigns. Budget was not approved. Still, it's not approved in Germany, but hopefully with the new budget, if it will be, I will share information that the deal between Armenia and Germany was done. Again, here is next steps. It's very generally what is here presented, this point. Identify the potential creditor partners interested in debt for climate swap. First, initiate bilateral conversation through diplomatic channels. It's when you have a communication strategy, actually everything is there. You can mention how you will work. You will ask your ambassador to talk like in Paris, or you will ask ambassador of France in your country to talk whatever. Analysis of that portfolio, potential climate projects, IMF is playing quite important role, but it's a additional extra lecture, so I will not concentrate on this issue, but IMF is an important player here. And as I said before, they were against of the process, but in 2023, actually, IMF published a paper by director of IMF about debt for climate swap, and it was the first time actually that IMF published this paper that debt for climate swap may work. This feasibility of implementation of selected project is like 10-20 page documents that you just take and go anytime that you are going for negotiation. Again, communication strategy, incorporating debt for climate swap into countries' foreign policy. It's a very important point, because if you are starting to talk with any of creditor countries, but then after 5 months you have intergovernmental meeting and skipping this point, then it's not in your interest. So once you decide to do this, then it should become a part of your foreign policy, to be able to have this ownership for the process. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a refreshing break, refreshing exchange, and maybe also the possibility to recharge a little bit. And we're now moving into the next part of our session, the panel discussion on debt for climate swaps, where while there were already so many perspectives on this issue, can explore some more dimensions. These mechanisms can really contribute to sustainable finances and climate action. So as we now transition into the panel discussion, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Matthias Walz, Associate Program Officer for Sustainable Finance at UNU-FLORES at the United Nations University Institute for Integrated Management of Material Fluxes and of Resources here in Dresden. And Dr. Walz brings a rich background in both academia and the financial industry. He holds a PhD in corporate sustainability from the Dresden University of Technology, an MSc in information systems from the London School of Economics, and a degree in business administration from the University of Augsburg. And at UNU-FLORES, his focus is on the equitable reconciliation of basic human needs within planetary boundaries, and like resource consumption within the planetary boundaries. And he specializes in sustainable finance and corporate sustainability, with particular interest in material flow cost accounting as a tool to enhance resource efficiency and support circular economy practices. And Dr. Walz's expertise in integrating financial mechanisms with environmental sustainability makes him really a valuable contributor to this panel discussion. So thank you both for being here. And with both Erik Grigoryan and Matthias Walz bringing in important perspectives from policy implementation and sustainable finance, we can delve deeper also into the practicalities. And I invite you both to have a seat here. And diving deeper into this topic. Yes. We will share this one. So because anyway, only one person can speak at the time. So, but I would actually like to start with a question to you, Matthias. As your focus and also the focus of UNU-FLORES is on the Resource Nexus. How do you think the Resource Nexus can contribute to the improvement of the design and outcomes of debt for climate swaps?
This is a very, very good question. First of all, it's about the Resource Nexus, and we focus on our institute exactly on the Resource Nexus. I want to explain a little bit what is the Resource Nexus, what we are talking about. And the institute is about integrated management of resources, of environmental resources. And we consider as resources, for example, water, but also materials, biota. It's space, it's climate, soil, and these 6 principal resources. We don't look directly not only on the resources, for example, on soil or on water, but we look on the nexus, which means on the connection between the resources. And it must not only be 2 resources, it could be also several resources. So we study what are the interrelations between these resources, or are there trade-offs between water and soil, for example. And the second layer of resources where we look at, we say that there is also energy, food, waste, land, and sea. And with this, this is our framework, how we look on resources, how we study resources, and how we look on the interrelations and trade-offs of these resources. And now to your question, could this perspective improve debt for climate swap initiatives parts? Then the answer is yes. And because when we look on, for example, a debt for climate swap, and Erik already mentioned deforestation, there's a project, deforestation, then there are resources involved, like, for example, forest, in our case, then a biota where there's plants, but it's based on soil. And there are interrelated resources between these elements, and also water is needed for growing wood forest. And then later it gets material, there's timber from this wood, what will be later come into the building sector, for example. And there's also involved the climate, as we say, okay, if there is growing wood, then there will be carbon sequestration through the growth of the forest. So there are different resources integrated. And we actually did a study on deforestation in China on the Resource Nexus. And the idea was in China also to grow their forest in different areas. And so we have this resource that we need land, we need space, we need the biota, and we need the soil, and we need a climate for foresting, for growing the plants. And what happened then in that area, that formerly there was no forest, that it was other land, and with the forest there was it took too much water out of the ground, or it was not meant, or in that area was no water at this time, and so the water was not there in the rivers anymore, and it causes other problems. So there was this nexus between, okay, we do deforestation, but then we cannot only look on that we then have, for example, timber, that we have CO2 sequestration, but we also have to look on the other resource, in this case, the water, which was missing somewhere else. With that in mind, and now we have this debt for climate swap project for deforestation. If we consider the whole resource nexus, then we create more information, more transparency, how such a project should be structured, that it is successful, and what risks are involved. And with more information, we get better financial conditions. Either the risks get higher, then we get, as a creditor, conditions are worse. But if I'm on the debtor side, if you see, okay, we have all the risks in mind, then it could be beneficial for the creditor that he get better conditions for that. And so this resource nexus perspective, looking on financial transactions, helps to make them, also more transparent, to see what is going on. And so, and this is then this resource nexus, and that for finance swaps, yes, the resource nexus perspective can maybe generate another design of the project, and also then other outcomes.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias. I understand how the concept of the resource nexus can help to define really good projects that are beneficial in the long term and avoid negative consequences of well-intended ideas. And this would be a long-term benefit then also for the debtor country and help them to shape a viable project that they bring to the table when negotiating with a creditor country. Now, this is on the project side, and we spoke a lot about that. In the end, also the negotiations between countries are what characterizes this mechanism. Erik, can you think of any circumstances under which you advise countries not to pursue a debt for climate swap? For example, what risks or conditions might make this mechanism less appropriate or even counterproductive?
It's an interesting question, actually. Opposite what I said during the last 1 hour. If the country is super rich, they don't need any money. They can at least operate from other side to be creditor and to help debitor countries. But I believe that a very clear NDC and this implementation plan, NDC financial plans are necessary for countries to start to negotiate. If you don't have this part done properly, if you don't know what to offer your potential partners, I will recommend to postpone, to try to, to be adequately prepared for this part, because I will not name the country, but we met during one COPs of one of partner countries, and my president talks with their president explaining that for climate swap, and he was very, very enthusiastic, even asked his advisor to come and said, I just realized there is a mechanism that we can avoid paying our debts. And then after a few months, they sent just letters to their creditors without any preparation, just sending letters them saying that we want, to swap our debts to you and to do some big hydropower plants in our country. Of course, they receive a negative response from half of creditors, and from other half, even no any response, because it was not a good way of communicate without preparation. So your question is very a straight answer. If you are not prepared to answer any question that will be raised, do not start. Even with Germany, when we started to talk, the first communication when we did, it came a very straight, I will say the negative response saying that we are interested on any kind of activities with that, but not with you, because of your GDP is higher, so we will consider more least developed countries or whatever. Then we prepared a detailed explanation of mechanism saying that this is not that what I already mentioned here is not that forgiveness, this is a platform and other. And if you will go now to your website of BMZ, or just Google BMZ debt for climate, you will see it in the website saying that the German government is looking to do that for climate swap with the middle income countries. This is the arguments that actually we sent them to explain why we need to do it. So be prepared until you will start to not have the same problem
and a very long-term thinking also, and now it's starting to bear fruits, hopefully. Yeah, and it's not directly a question, but a thought that came to me also based on an earlier exchange we had, where you mentioned a key ingredient is really also sufficient expertise in the countries, like also in the debtor country. So it needs people who actually understand these financial mechanisms, who are able to set up projects that are beneficial for the country, but also interesting for the creditor country. And I started thinking maybe we could develop a short course idea along these lines. So it's maybe a side discussion we can have.
Because we have a lot of participants from developing countries, it's a key issue because unfortunately, lack of capacity on negotiation, on expertise, it's limiting opportunities of developing countries, because of course there are a lot of good negotiators on debt issues, the IMF groups and other, but most of them usually acting on behalf of creditors or on behalf of MDBs, but not from developing countries. So that's why sometimes I remember when we just started, I told that it was a signal from MDB saying not touch, but then one of the MDBs opened a so-called supporting program of our initiative, and then we started to receive delegation coming from the bank every month, just coming and saying it's not possible. It's really like 12 people just flying from DC coming and saying it's not possible. So yes, I mean, it's important to have a capacity internally. Usually you have a better capacity in ministries of finance in developing countries. There are some, the people who knows the debt structure, how it's worked, the arguments. So it's important that you will have your country ownership feeling when you are negotiating, because of course you will always have some voices saying that it's impossible or whatever you will get, not what you are expecting.
Another question to you, Matthias, building on that. In general, what do you think, which specific reforms in international finance would help to scale mechanisms such as the debt for climate swaps?
Yeah, international finance, actually the international financial architecture, sometimes it's mentioned international financial system, which is made of, consistent of the World Bank and of World Bank institutes, also like the International Monetary Fund, international financial institutions, a Bank of International Settlement. So there is a lot in this, you can also say club. There are also existing club for this debt. This Paris club was already mentioned, London club so there's a lot in this international financial system going on. And if you, for example, look on the World Bank, how are the voting rights in such an institute? And the G7 countries have voting rights about 47%. So actually, they say or rule what is going on, what are they doing, and if they want not to talk about that, then nobody talks about that. So and United Nations, and there's for several years now, and now again for the Pact for the Future, it is clear there has to be a reform of the international financial architecture, this kind of architecture, which was developed after World War II, also to build up here Germany, and after World War II to find financing mechanisms. Later it was further extended to developed countries, but it did not fit anymore like it was first planned. So, and when now we think about a reform of this international financial structure, then we suggest, or from a Resource Nexus perspective, to look not only on the financial system itself, when they talk about financial sustainability or the sustainable finance, often they think about sustainable finance, that the financial system should be sustainable forever. We always want to have our system, our trading, our share, our stock markets and so on, and make money out of finance. But finance is the one part, And actually, you can't eat money. You need a real economy. And there was a decoupling from finance mechanisms, from mechanisms in the real economy, trading. And we had, for example, several times when there are financial instruments, derivatives on, for example, food, on oil or whatsoever, then often it's not traded, is a financial instrument, but not the real asset behind. And so prices could be totally different. And this is the current state. And a reform would be, and there is, for example, this debt swap, that for climate swap, a good example that we try to get more, not a top-down approach to change things, but a bottom-up approach, that countries themselves say, okay, we want to make a climate protection or climate mitigation, climate adaptation measurements, deforestation. We need finance for that. And one mechanism then from bottom up, structure it, have a good communication concept, and then approach bilateral, direct your creditor, and make a bilateral agreement on that. And so this decoupling from the finance system to the real economy, to bring that together would be one aspect of this reform of the financial architecture, and kind of decentralized finance, that we have it not huge financial instruments with huge amounts, but decentralized where we needed the finance. And one last word, what finance at the moment often is structured is that things get monetized, which formerly had no price, get a price tag on it, so it's monetized. Then it gets funded, then there's a project out of it, an investment, then you have it financialized. Then often these financial instruments get brought together. This is kind of a syndication of different instruments, and these are then and also shares are then speculated on this with derivative instruments, and this has to be reformed, that we are more looking on the real economy and help with finance to structure trade in the real economy.
Thank you, Matthias. I understand that more focus on the real economy is really key, one of the key points. Erik, in your experience, you mentioned several times that the international financial institutions have been very skeptic, to be to use a mild term, regarding the debt for climate swaps, but are now more supportive. What else could ideally happen in terms of engaging the International Monetary Fund and other international financial institutions to help them see the benefit of this mechanism and to also be more supportive of it? Or is it already at an optimal?
Actually, I believe that some kind of voices that is coming from developing countries, understanding of their role in international architecture of climate finance and climate process is very important, because we had the chance during the networking to discuss that a lot of NDCs, the process is run by donor institutions, by UNDP, without ownership from countries. Once developing countries will realize their real power in this international architecture, understanding that, for example, in case of seeds, the countries without contributing 0.0001% on the climate change process, now the most vulnerable, affected, doubly, triple affected by this situation, because see, when it's a natural disaster, then it's hitting the seats, then it's reducing their tourism, then it's reducing their income, increasing the debt. So they are affected by this, but their voices are not so strong yet because they don't know their power as a part of international climate negotiation architecture. So I believe that as much as initiatives will come from developing countries approaching different mechanisms, because we are talking about that for climate swap, but this is one of the mechanisms. For example, Article 6 that was designed to help developing countries to do some projects there, to get some financial resources. It's still not clear yet. For many years, it's not set and it's not working fully. So I believe that knowledge and understanding of the role of every country is important, actually, and it will increase chances to do this. And also our participants coming from developing countries, just to have in your mind that knowledge and experience that you have may change a lot in your countries. If you will be in some places that you can take decisions, we just discussed it before. If you will work somewhere here in BMZ or in any ministry, maybe your contribution will be small, because institutionally this is much more better. So Germany knows how better to manage the air pollution, how to dispose waste, how to manage water resources. But in many developing countries, these issues are still pending. And with your knowledge and understanding, you can go increase there, and being there also to to increase the ownership of your country. So for such kind of negotiations, it may be that for climate swap, it may be any other financial resources that may be available to generate for country.
Thank you, Erik. So I take from this that the potential collective power of many so-called developing countries is quite strong, and I hope you take with you that also your collective power is quite strong. Next question, with the request for a bit shorter answer, because we are already approaching the end of our panel discussion time. We had several examples also from Erik how the private sector can be included in this. From your point of view, Matthias, how do you think the private sector actors can be incentivized to engage in or support such activities, such as the debt for climate swaps?
Yeah, we had already the private sector. Erik mentioned France and water projects, which could be constructed and water networks or infrastructure by private companies, private sector. So they are interested. And another idea, Görner is doing his final work on climate credits or offsetting climate emissions, and like we have these NDCs for countries, we could have also nationally or also worldwide, but I think national to get it must be a national rule that also private companies have to contribute with kind of NDCs, and to that they can offset projects the CO2 emissions, and with that again they can be incentivized to go into projects where CO2 sequestration happens, and by that fulfill one of their obligations, but could also be having a financial part involved. Short answer.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matthias. We covered quite a lot of the questions that I have, also the backup questions. This is very good. Gives me a good feeling that you do not go home with so many unanswered questions. maybe it's a final opportunity if there's some urgent question from the audience, or even a not so urgent, but
kind of comment.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, because I would say thank you to Erik, because I really liked his presentation and the message to you that there are really different perspectives there and concepts there where things and change can happen. And it's not one size fits all. It's very specific. And there are not only the mechanisms, like Erik mentioned, a lot is about communication, structuring, doing things around, and doesn't matter what you do, you always have to take care about these, let's say, soft skills, soft issues, what have to be there to make a project run or to make things let it happen. And yeah, I think, and I just want to stress that this is very important for everybody, to get this as a message from today's afternoon event.
Thank you, Matthias. And maybe as an opportunity for you, Erik, to hammer home the most important points, what should everybody keep in their mind, leave this room?
Just because I had the chance several times to deliver some, I don't know how it get called during this graduation ceremony to say, but I'm repeating again and again. You have a big chance actually to change something in your country. I'm not talking because, I had some career growth and I become minister, but I become because I'm an environmental specialist. I never been in any party. I never been in a political person. I was just environment manager. And this environment management skills, knowledge, and whatever. Of course, I had different other educations in my country, in Greece here, but this plays a really important role. And try actually to gain as much as you can. I remember our classes were starting in 9 o'clock, finishing in 6. So after 4 months, I had a chance actually to see something in Dresden because we were all time just doing some classes and whatever. So fortunately, tomorrow I will have a chance to go to Art Master Gallery, although we were there. But I will say that the CIPSEM played quite important role for my career. And I will just encourage you to try to get as much as possible information and try to do a better environment in your countries, because improving environment, you are also improving socioeconomic situation, just improving livelihood of your citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, before we close, a really heartfelt thank you to both you, Erik, for sharing not only your deep knowledge on the subject, but also your passion for finding real-world solutions. And also Matthias for bringing valuable perspectives from the sustainable finances and the Resource Nexus and this interface. And this really, both of your experiences help to ground this session today. And I personally feel very enriched by this and activated to also deepen my understanding of this. And I have the feeling that some fruits will also grow from this. So thank to both of you, and thanks to everybody who joined us here on site and also online. I hope this session really helped you to understand the concept of debt for climate swaps and beyond. And let's carry these conversations forward. So to our networks, to our homes also, and institutions, and maybe at some point also to the negotiation tables. So solutions like this need champions, and you might also be one of them. So here's to this bearing more fruit. So thanks to all of you.